Hey, 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 welcome to yet another episode of Period Sis. I'm your host, Mandy B, and this is brought to you by none other than the official box owner. I do once again want to thank everyone who has tuned in to Period Sis wherever you listen to us. Make sure you rate, subscribe, and review, and also be sure to check us out at the officialboxowner.com website where we have all of our products and everything going on. But this is Period Sis. So we're going to get right into another tale of womanhood. And this week we are joined with a woman to discuss I don't know, is it the story and the problem with our society surrounding pregnancy with big women. I'm going to say that for now. Okay, this is another tale of womanhood for women by women. And hello, Nikki. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Mandy. So, saying fat is perfectly okay. We
Look,
don't have to say big. We don't have to say plus size. We are fat. The adjective of fat has turned into where people assume it's bad, and it's
I
not.
know,
We
and
have
you
to
guys,
change the wording.
yes, and y'all know I have went through my my weight loss journey in out in public. I was 230 pounds. I'm now about 165, even more than my 150 that I had gotten down to after gastric. And in pre-production, talking with Nikki, who is a mother of a 1 year old, I'm super excited to talk with her about her journey. As soon as I was talking, she felt like me using all of these other adjectives except for fat. And Nikki was just like, girl, you could say fat. It's okay. And so anyone listening, I don't want you to feel offended because in my line of questioning and in this conversation of exploring Nikki's journey through pregnancy, I want you to know, and I don't want you to be offended, but Nikki is fully comfortable in her skin and who she is. And so she came at me and said, I want to share my journey about trying to conceive as a fat woman. And so we're not only going to talk about her weight, but also her being a black woman. So before we get started, Nikki, yes, you're a mother, but let's go back to growing up fat. Can I say that? Is
Yeah,
that something that you experienced
absolutely.
early on? And can you just let me know what your relationship was like with your peers and your family and what that was like growing up?
So, I've always been the fat kid. So, growing up, I've been in two or three different fat camps that my parents put me in over the
Okay.
years. And to them, it wasn't so much as you look bad, it was you're young and we want you healthy. But I've been fat since first, second grade. I've been in husky clothing. I've
Right.
always been the tall, fat kid. So I'm 6'2", and I have
Oh.
been 6'2" since ninth grade.
Oh wow, you're
I
tall.
I am. I transferred out of elementary school because the bullying had gotten so bad. Little boys would follow me around the hallways and make elephant noises. And the principal's response was, boys will be boys.
Oh wow.
So I switched schools to kind of get away from that. But after elementary school, the bullying kind of went away. And that probably has to do with the height. You start to get a little intimidated after a certain age point. But I'm the sweetest thing. I've never fought anybody. So it was just the appearance.
And so you had to deal with, of course, young kids being bullies. Can you let me know how your weight affected you when it came into puberty and when it came into dating and finally finding attraction to boys and what dating was like for you early on?
So I can honestly say I never had issues dating. You'd occasionally get someone who's like, I don't like fat girls. But I was always talking to someone, which is the wording that you use starting to when I was allowed to and a little before I was allowed to. I grew up in a relatively strict household. My dad's a pastor, mom's a
Okay.
pastor's wife. So, relatively strict household. But of course, we still did all the things. And you'd always get people, especially as the fat friend, because all of my friends were super
Oh,
tiny, especially in undergrad. And the person would be like, oh, I'm stuck with the fat girl. So
oh
you
Jesus.
definitely hear that a lot in those first couple of years. But I met my husband, or he met me when he was a freshman in college and I was a sophomore. And he stalked all of my social media. He would like all the pictures. He would comment under all the pictures. And I was like, why is this big headed boy bothering me? And it wasn't until a year later on New Year's Eve, he commented under a picture that was like single at New Year's, single at Christmas. He's like, you might not be single for Valentine's Day. I said, according to who?
Oh,
Me.
oh. He came in swinging, didn't he?
Under an Instagram post very publicly. Him and an ex-boyfriend were both commenting under the post at the same time. And we went out on a date less than a month later, January 2015, and we have been together ever since.
That is amazing. And what also is amazing about that story is a lot of people assume that when you're a bigger woman, you just have to settle, or that people, that you'll never find love. And I mean, we actually just got an email sent into us over on the Horrible Decisions Patreon platform, where she felt like she was going to forever be undeserving of love because she had gained 150 pounds because of a disability that she was dealing with. And it was unfortunate because in our society, there is constant fat phobia, and the treatment of women specifically. I mean, we're seeing it now in social media with the Lizzo conversation and just the pressures to be a certain size. I guess you kind of, in hearing your story to childhood, it didn't seem like it ever really affected you. Were you always this confident, or was that something you just, because you lived with it your whole life, you just ignored it?
A little bit of both. So I've lived with it my whole life, but I also grew up in a household of positivity. So
Okay.
I grew up with my granddad. Always, he called me big girl sometimes as a loving way, but he also called me pretty girl all the time, 24/7. My stepdad was always talking about, you are so pretty. My mom, they put that in me to where
Awesome.
it was really hard for anybody else to take that away from me. And you understand the things that you require. I watched how my stepdad, my dad, if I say my dad, I'm talking about him. But my dad, I watched how he loved my mom. And I knew that's the love that I'm going to get. And there
I
wasn't
love
a,
that.
this is the kind of love I might get. No, this is all that I'm willing to accept.
I love that. So you're with your partner. How long were you guys together? And your partner is now your husband,
He
correct?
is, and he is really tiny. And you often see people like he's tall, but he's skinny. And so when we first started dating, you kind of see people stop and look because it is a different dynamic.
Right. It's funny because I always say when I was at my biggest, the skinnier the man, the more they loved me, honey. Maybe they needed some meat on their bones, and I was the meat that was gonna be on their
I don't
bones.
remember you saying that.
I always attracted just the smallest, and that's what I was attracted to. And it's crazy because with them, my weight, they'd never mention my weight. I would literally be with trainers sometimes, and it would be amazing because I was who they wanted. My curves, my creases, everything. They loved it.
But you
So
hear a lot of the time, and I can't say I'm always like, like, oh my gosh, look at me, I'm fabulous. There have absolutely been days where I'll look at him and be like, are you sure you love me? Am I too big? Are you sure? Are you sure we're okay? Are you sure I'm okay? And he'll look at me, he was like, I knew you were fat when I told you I loved you. And we had
he
this
a real one.
conversation. And
I
he'll
love
say
that.
that.
That's
He was like, I knew your size when I met you, and I loved you then, and I love you now.
that is amazing, and I think that that's the type of partner anyone should have. Like, those words of affirmations are definitely
Hmm.
needed. I did want to get into what this episode is about because you came at me and I was like, girl, let's talk about it. So, Nikki, you got married to your husband, and after marrying your husband, you wanted to start a family. Can you talk to me about what the conversation was like first with your husband and then you all trying to go about conceiving?
So when we first kind of started dating, we knew we wanted to get married and have kids. We said we wanted three, and now we may only want one. But when we talked about it, we knew after we got married, we wanted to be married for a year.
Okay.
So we got married. We dated 2015. We got married in 2018, and we got pregnant in 2019. So
Okay.
fairly along the lines, but even when I moved to a different city in Georgia, me and my OB were already talking about, okay, I'm going to be on birth control only for 2 years, and then we'll get off to try to get pregnant, and she was fully supportive.
Okay.
But then we moved to South Carolina shortly after we got married. In the first place that I found as an OB, I told her, hey, in about 6 months, we're going to start trying to conceive. At the time, we were using what's called the natural family planning method. I know Wheezy uses that, but like I tracked using ovulation strips and basal thermometers to avoid getting pregnant. And that's how we avoided for the first year.
Okay.
And then, and I told her, and she was like, no, if something happens, I'm not going to help you get pregnant if you need help. She told me,
Wait. Your OB, who was a woman as well,
yes,
said that she would not help.
She would not help because it was a risk she didn't want to take at my weight. So, of course,
the risk being your weight and your weight only?
That was it.
Oh, wow.
So I reached out to local communities and I was like, hey, I need a what they call provider of size. So providers who work with any size patients without stigma. And
one moment, because I had no clue this was a thing.
Yeah,
and maybe the people listening may not know. So it's called a size provider. And this is different insurances that assist with
it's
people
not
who
insurance.
would be.
There's websites that have it. Yeah, because if you fat women and men have to find doctors who will not instantly jump to weight. You start to see so many doctors. You can come in and say, hey, my arm is hurting. Lose weight and then it'll stop hurting.
Oh, okay.
I have a migraine. Lose weight and the migraine will go away. So you have to find doctors who look beyond just your weight as an issue for things that have nothing to do with weight.
Okay. So when you say providers, you are talking about the actual medical professionals.
Yes, the actual medical professionals. So I found one and I was in love with her. And when we sat down and she was like, hey, after 3 months of not getting pregnant, and I think it was about 3 or 4 after I finally sat down and was like, hey, I want to do something. After 3 months, she said a perfectly healthy person should start seeing some kind of movement. And so she offered, I can't think of the medication name. And she was like, all this does is start your ovulation earlier.
Okay.
And
so wait, I just want to make sure I have this right. So you stopped the birth control?
Yeah, I stopped birth control really early.
Okay.
I did the implant, which I was allergic to from the inside out.
Okay.
I tried the IUD, which fell out. And because I have migraines, I can't take the pill, which is why I switched to natural family planning.
Okay, and so you're saying in 3 months, what was not happening?
So nothing was happening. Knowing we were having sex on ovulation days and nothing happening, she was like, hey, at this point, let's see what else is going on. She was like, I'll send you just to a reproductive endocrinologist just so they can run tests and make sure everything's where it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And this is where I was like, okay, she's all for me. And when I sat with the OB, she talked about how weight isn't an issue, isn't what causes you to be high risk. It's if you have additional issues related to your weight that cause you to be high risk. And people don't talk about that side of the research. And she was like, with you not having any comorbidities is what they're called, aside from your weight, I have no issue with helping you get pregnant. She was great. Okay. So I went to the reproductive endocrinologist and we were sitting in her office and she said, and this is her words, there's nothing we can do for you unless you lose 250 pounds.
How could you share what your weight was and essentially what weight you would be minus the 250?
So I was above 400. I am above 400. And she wanted me about 200 to 175 to 200. I have not been 200 pounds since middle school, high school maybe.
Wow. Okay.
So even at my height, it's not in that healthy BMI range to be 175 at 6'2" anyway.
Right.
But she wouldn't do anything. So all they did was they looked at my ovaries and she said, there's too much fat here. We can't see them.
You're lying.
No, that was her exact words to me. And I was like, well, I know I'm ovulating. She said, well, how do you know? I said, I track ovulation faithfully and have for over a year. She's like, well, we can't tell how many eggs you have. Now, funny thing, 2 weeks later, I did get a positive pregnancy test.
Okay.
So there was nothing wrong.
Right.
And kind of here's where it starts getting a little weird because I love my OB. She was phenomenal. I was 10 weeks pregnant, going to my third follow-up, and when I got there, you normally see a nurse first.
Okay.
My doctor pulled me into a room. And I was like, hey, Dr. B, I won't say her name. I don't normally see you yet. And she was like, I wanted to be the one to talk to you. What do you mean? You know there's 4 of us in the practice. All 4 of us, we have to have a 75% agreement on patients that we see because you never know who will be here to actually deliver your baby. I was like, yeah, I know. Well, I'm the only one who was okay with continuing to see you.
Excuse me?
So I got fired from my OB's office. And to the point where she walked me out of the back door so that I didn't have to walk back through and see all the nurses and all the doctors and everything. And she was like, we're just going to let you go see the high-risk doctors, maternal fetal medicine for good. And I had already seen them once for a follow-up. And the high-risk doctor said, hey, we don't see a reason to continue to see you because you're aside from your weight, you don't have a high-risk pregnancy.
Right.
Well, I had to see them the whole pregnancy because my OB's office did not want to continue to see me. The one that I handpicked.
What was that experience like going now back to the high risk? Like, were you comfortable with the high risk doctors, and did they have anything to say about? I can't believe
they were
here.
Shocked that they fired me. They were really shocked, and they said they don't see that happen, where they are someone's primary provider.
Right.
Normally, they're only there if it's a really high risk situation. There were all these expectations of issues and things that could go wrong. And I saw them the whole pregnancy. But you miss out on all those things from regular doctor's offices, the pictures on the walls. And you look for, as a fat person, you look for specific things in doctor's offices, right? So you look for offices that have chairs without the ends on them. You look for doctors who have extended scales in the office.
Right.
Maternal fetal medicine didn't have chairs that were comfortable. They were all right. They only had one scale that really worked well. And don't get me wrong, seeing them was good because I had a black nurse practitioner.
Okay.
And I saw her the whole pregnancy, but I had a list of things that I asked my OB before I started. Your experience with fat women, your experience with black women. I kept a list of these questions to make sure that I be best looked out for. And when I called my doula and I was like, hey, they fired me. She was like, what? She recommended them and she was in shock.
So let's get to your process leading right up to delivery. So your 4th trimester, and were there any complications as you excelled through pregnancy? What were the conversations? And mind you, outside of being a fat woman, you are also a black woman, and there's also the stigmas and not trusting healthcare providers there as well. What was your experience with that, then also being a black woman?
So my biggest thing was finding a doula who had experience with both.
Okay.
I could not find a black doula here where I live who had experience with fat women. And I needed both of those things because both of those things play a major role in my overall outcome.
Correct.
So I found a doula who was a white woman who had worked with lots of fat women and lots of black women.
Okay.
And it mattered. So throughout my pregnancy, and I'll talk about the 3rd trimester as well, they made me take what's the gestational diabetes test 4 times. Most people only take it once unless they are borderline the first time. I was perfect all 4 times that they made me take it. But they were like shocked, not realizing regular diabetes has to do with weight. Gestational diabetes has to do with your placenta. It has absolutely nothing to do with your weight. So I passed it each time, and each time they were shocked, but I was tired of drinking this nasty stuff.
Right.
And so those kinds of things. And the fourth time was I was 37 weeks right before delivery. And my doula was like, ask them why they're making you do it again. And they were like, they just wanted to make sure everything was okay. And she was like, you are more than welcome to say no. But it makes you feel like a bad mom if you could potentially be doing something to cause harm to your child. Because my pregnancy was very uneventful. Besides being sick every day, it was completely uneventful. But
so normal as far as like there were no scares, there were no tests that came back bad. Like you were a healthy pregnant woman, and every time you went into the doctor, they treated you as though you were the most high risk, unhealthy patient they've had.
So because of my weight, they make me get extra ultrasounds, which you love to see the baby more often. But I don't need an ultrasound every 2 weeks. Every ultrasound.
You were going every 2 weeks?
Starting at about 28 weeks, they did ultrasounds every 2 weeks.
What's normal? Because I haven't gone through pregnancy. So what's normal?
Every month towards the last trimester, and then every 2 weeks closer to the end. But I was doing it starting in my third trimester, and everything was fine. There was never a scare. There was never you might go into labor. The only scare was I got into a car accident the week before my induction.
Oh, Jesus. Well, yeah, that's a scare.
That had nothing to do with the pregnancy.
So let's get into delivery. Did you know the doctor that was going to deliver? Was your doula allowed to be there? And were there complications? Were there not? What was the conversation during labor?
I gave birth in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh,
May of 2020.
Okay.
And so my doula was not allowed to be there. She was there on the phone, but she wasn't there in person. And when I got there, I had 2 Black nurses, and I was like, oh my God, thank God. I was really excited, way more excited than I probably should have been. But when I saw the doctor, there was a woman who came in, a Black woman, and I was like, hey, I just want to make sure y'all aren't going to force me into a C-section just because I'm fat.
Oh, so you had that conversation.
Oh, I was not afraid to have it.
Is that something that they were pushing you towards having a cesarean because of your weight?
They kept saying that it would not be just my weight, but when I asked this doctor, she said, I don't know, it could happen. That's not what no. No. And that was my biggest fear. My doula and I had worked through that fear of a C-section, but my biggest fear was that I wouldn't wake up afterwards. I was so afraid to get anesthesia and not wake up from it, because I haven't been under anesthesia before.
Okay, so your fear was anesthesia, not
waking up from it or not listening to me. And
right.
I finally I had an Asian doctor he was amazing, and he didn't push anything, but closer to pushing, a male doctor, he was there, and I said, I need you to promise me you won't let them push me into a C-section. And he said, I promise. And he was a white male. And this was my fear. But when I got the epidural, the guy was like, I can't quite see through the fat. It's not quite working.
Wait, who said this?
That
was not said.
He said
you heard that?
Yeah, and I was so scared. And he tried for almost 30 minutes. The most painful part of childbirth was that epidural going in, and it fell out. After he tried for 30 minutes to put it in, it fell out, and they sent in the chief of anesthesiology who got it back in less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
And he did it great. So obviously that wasn't the issue. And overall, and I tell people this a lot because I don't want people to misunderstand that being fat while pregnant results in this traumatic birthing experience. My birthing experience was phenomenal after the epidural. My nurses didn't force me to give birth laying on my back. I sat up and they gave me a bar to pull on so I wasn't stuck on my back even with the epidural. It was great. I mean, we pushed for 3 hours. And going into towards the end of the 3-hour mark, he was like, her head is right here. We don't want to have to go into a C-section. You made me promise.
Right.
And she came. And even recovery. I had what is a 4th-degree tear, but my
Okay.
recovery
But
was great.
now you got to explain it. Listen, there's a lot of women listening, and as myself, what I didn't know there was first, second, third, fourth. I didn't know there were
Yeah.
degrees of tears. What
So
is a
you can
fourth degree
tear
tear?
further back into your perineum. And so that's what happened just because I was pushing for so long.
Right.
I was exhausted. And so they stitch it back up,
Right.
but my recovery was smooth. Instead of a
Okay.
6-week follow up, I had a 4-week follow up and it was all healed. And normally it takes 8 to 10.
You should have been like, see, bitches, I'm healthy.
And that's what I told my doctor. I was like, I'm fine. There was nothing wrong. My mama told me the other day. She said, "Have you called them?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "You need to call them or go up there and take a picture of your baby."
Can I also ask you so after giving birth, were there conversations regarding you breastfeeding? Were there conversations about you potentially gaining more weight with the pregnancy that was an issue? What things came across their table to bring to you as could be potentially a problem post birth?
So now post birth, they weren't concerned with any issues.
Okay.
Aside from I had a really bad migraine from the epidural, and instead of ignoring it, they sent me to a neurologist. So they were really adamant and on top of that. I still see her to this day for migraines.
Okay.
Breastfeeding, if I knew what I knew now then, I would look for a lactation consultant who had experience with larger breasts. Because if they don't know how to show you how to make the baby latch. Because my biggest fear was, what if I suffocate her? We're first-time parents away from our parents because our parents live in Georgia and we're in South Carolina.
But also COVID, that eliminated you even being around people too.
We took COVID very seriously. Since March of 2020, I have gone into a store maybe 3 times.
Oh, wow. Even now, today.
We are fully vaccinated and I'm still very paranoid.
Okay.
I don't trust people and I have to keep her safe.
Right. Of course.
So even during the whole time, I stayed home. We took her somewhere for the first time 2 weeks ago and she saw another kid, a little white boy, and she kept trying to touch his face. And I was like, you can't touch people.
You can't. I didn't even think about, how kids and their social skills are going to change because of this pandemic. It's, because they don't know what a pandemic is or what's going on. Or
He's not in daycare. Our job sent us home. We work for the same company. We've been home since March.
Oh, wow.
So you get a blessing there because we experienced her first year of life and face to face with her and didn't miss anything. But you also are in a place where it's a really hard balance of parenthood, being home, and a pandemic.
Well, I wanted to ask you as well before we get out of here. We started the episode and you said we wanted a family. We wanted 3 kids. Now I think we just gonna stick at 1. Now you've went through the process with doctors that now are familiar with you, that you somewhat trust. The outcome. You've been through it. What is stopping you from wanting to grow your family larger? And was it anything that caused PTSD from that first experience of pregnancy that is leading to that? What's led you to now only possibly wanting 1 child instead of more?
So aside from my daughter being real busy, because I don't use the word bad, but aside from her being real busy, I would have to find an OB first. Because I went through maternal fetal medicine for my whole pregnancy, you have to be referred to them. So I have to find an OB first who's comfortable with taking me as a fat woman before I could even do that. And before my initial OB sent me home, she said, I would love to continue to see you as your gynecologist because then you only see that 1 doctor. But I don't know if I want to go back there. She was great. She's phenomenal. But now I have a stink in my mouth because of the overall experience.
Right,
to
right.
hear someone say, you're not a risk we want to take, shows me that you're really worried about those numbers.
And not worried about me as a human being.
And my mom was, when I told her they switched me, she said, I was really hoping that they would. not fire me, but let me go to maternal fetal medicine. She's like, because I want to make sure that you're okay, and that special attention is gonna help. So she had her own concerns that she voiced very carefully.
Okay, and so that's kind of what's leaving you like
That's
maybe this.
what's leaving me there, kind of like, I don't know if I want to be judged for 9 months. I don't want to keep drinking that nasty drink. I don't want to go to the doctor as much as I did.
So
I
I
don't
did
want
want
to be
to.
terrified.
Well, I wanted to talk to you then, without going through the process yourself. When we spoke previously, you gave me some insight on even your other family planning options that because of your weight also affects you doing things like IVF or doing things like adoption. Could you talk about how your weight is affecting you potentially having a child another way?
So if I ever wanted to do IVF and IUI, I would have to lose an extreme amount of weight in order for it to ever even be an option. So they won't allow you to do it here anyway if your BMI is over 35.
Oh, wow.
They won't allow you to
Okay.
do it. So I have really friends in New York who she sued the fertility clinic for discrimination because they would not work with her. And the thing is, you often hear for equal rights for all of these other groups in the medical community, but why can't I, as a fat woman, have equal rights in medical care? What is my weight doing? If I want to take the risk, it's my life. If I want to take the risk and get IVF or IUI, how
And
does
if you
that
have the
affect
money to
you?
do it,
And the
right?
money to
Like,
do it, why is that a problem? But you also hear we want, and we've always said we wanted to adopt one day. BMI plays a factor in adoption. If you're over a certain weight, they won't allow you to adopt a child.
okay, can you talk about, is this state specific? What research have you done or what experience do you have with either an adoption agency or someone denying you or telling you that you weren't eligible to be an adoptive parent because of your weight? What is
So
that
this
about? Talk to
is
that.
solely based on if you were to go to a private clinic. Now, if you were to go kind of through the city or the state, you may not have that same issue. But
Okay.
for private clinics, especially in the South and some of the more northern places, over 40 BMI is going to be an issue.
Oh,
And this is because they want healthy parents. But you can't automatically equate weight to
wait
health.
to agree.
Because
And Lizzo says that often as well. But also, when I went to get my gastric, I was 5'1", 230. And I was right at 35. I literally was told I couldn't lose weight or I wouldn't qualify. And I literally only qualified because of BMI. But for any of you who may not have grown up even knowing about the BMI scale, I'm 5'1". To be considered healthy, I'm supposed to weigh like 110 pounds. I haven't weighed that since like I was in fifth or sixth grade. So the idea that because of my height being so short, health wise, anything over like 120, I was called obese since I was 11 years old because of that BMI scale. So very familiar, but also I'm bottom heavy. I have thighs. As Black women, our bodies are just shaped differently than even white people or other cultures and ethnicities, and they don't put that into perspective as well.
we have to remember BMI wasn't made by a scientist.
It was made by the government, right?
It
Or
was
something
made
like
by a
that.
mathematician
Oh
who just
shit.
wanted a way to classify obesity. But a scientist had nothing to do with it. And the medical community uses your weight to determine a lot.
They do.
I run a small Facebook group for fat moms, and a lot of them are like, what ways can I combat this stigma, or telling them you don't want to get on the scale. If a scale does not directly correlate to what is going to happen in this medical office today, I don't want to step on it.
Oh wow. Is that something that you can do? You
You
can
can
tell them I don't.
absolutely do it. If it is
Oh
not
wow.
related to your treatment, there is zero need for you to get on that scale. If I'm going to the doctor today for a cold, why do I need to step on your scale? While you're pregnant,
Oh
absolutely, because your weight can mean a whole bunch of other things while pregnant. If you're gaining too fast, because I was throwing up so much, losing anything was seen as a problem too quickly. But it's
Right.
for a cold, for a headache. There's zero reason. I fell the other day in the backyard playing with my kid in the pool. And when I went to the doctor's office, they were like, okay, step on this guy. I said, do I need to? I said, what do you mean, do you need to? Is there a medical reason you need my weight for a fall? And they were like, well, no. I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to get on it.
Okay. I
And
did not know that. And I know that just for a lot of women, whether they're battling weight issues or not, getting on the scale can trigger so much with women. So
mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you shared that. I didn't know that that was something you could deny.
I'm a huge fan of speaking up for yourself.
Especially in going to a doctor's office, I guess. So we always like to leave off with advice to our listeners, and you said you have a Facebook group, which is amazing, but what type of advice would you give to a fat mom? I know you have conversations with your Facebook group often, but where do you feel is one of the biggest concerns, and what advice do you have to give to that concern?
My biggest advice is your size is not the end all be all for your fertility or your pregnancy. Fight for your rights as a person to have a child because it always exists.
I love that. And I also love that you've created a group of support because I know how important that is for people. Would you be able to drop the name of your Facebook group? By the way, I do also want to put that in the description of this episode so that anyone who's interested knows where they can reach out to you. Like I said, you've come on just confident. Y'all, she checked me before. She's like, you could say fat. It's okay. I'm not offended. Like, let's just have a real ass conversation. And I love that too, because in these conversations a lot, especially just with culture now and society, you can offend people so easily. And so that I love that you were willing to check me early on that. And again, where can people find you if they want to seek more about you, your journey, or have any questions?
Absolutely. So I'm Fat Positive Motherhood on Instagram, and the Facebook group is the exact same name, Fat Positive Motherhood. And it's for anyone trying to conceive, having a child already, and you don't have to identify as a woman. We have quite a few trans men in the community, non-binary people in the community.
Awesome.
Are also able to join.
Awesome. That is amazing. Nikki, thank you so much for reaching out and doing this episode with me. And I'm certain that you definitely opened someone's eyes today with your experience and your knowledge. So I appreciate you for joining me on Period Sis. And guys, as always, stay tuned for some stats and facts. I do want to let you guys know some more information regarding obesity and pregnancy. So stay tuned. And Nikki, again, thank you so much for joining us today.